Well, last week we completed a series on prayer, so hopefully that doesn't mean that we've stopped increasing our prayer time and understanding that. But for the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at relationships. And yes, we're going to look at relationships that are going to focus a lot on married relationships. And there are those who are in the church who say, well, I'm going to take the next 4 weeks off because that doesn't involve me. But you need to be aware that relationships are relationships. In fact, as you read this morning, and we'll go back and look at it in a minute, we read in Colossians, this is not about a marriage relationship. So we'll look at that, but I wanted to review that as we talked this week about making love last a lifetime, and I'm stealing that from those of you who know the Adam Hamilton book and the study that we did on that probably my first year here. I stole that title of his book for the title of today's message. And then next week we are going to talk about rebuilding a love to last a lifetime. And that means that you could be in various stages of that. That you may be in a married relationship that just isn't what you wanted it to be. Or maybe your marriage has really taken a hit. And there's something serious, and we're going to talk about rebuilding that. And the third week, we're going to talk about living in love in a single relationship. Because God loves all you single folks too. And there is a relationship of love in being single. It is not something that is, I had a friend of mine who grew up in her church. She often said she felt that being 20 years old and single was looked down upon by the other members of the church, because as a young Christian woman, she should be ready to be married when she walked out of college. Wasn't the case, so we're certainly going to celebrate that. And then in the last week, in the fourth week, we're going to talk about dating. And we're going to talk about dating in a biblical sense, in a Christian sense. And on that Sunday, I'm going to ask the middle school and high school kids to stay here. They're not going to go downstairs. I challenge you, if you're involved in raising children, grandkids, nieces, and nephews, and your own kids as well, you may want to think about this, because I have changed my position over many years. What I was taught and what I believed as a young man is probably not as biblical as I once thought it was. So that's where we're headed for the next 4 weeks, to give you an idea of where we are and what we're doing. But for today, it's making love last a lifetime. And I don't know about you, but it's hard to make anything last a lifetime, but especially love. But if we go back to Colossians 3 and 5 to 7 that Dottie read, she started out in verse 5, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, to your nature, sexual immorality, the impurity, lust, evil desires, greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life that you once lived, meaning before you got to know Christ. But now you must rid yourselves of such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices, and have put on a new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge of the image of its Creator. This is about relationship. And relationship is formed by placing Christ first. So for those of you who, when I read, so when I tie it in, I focus closely on a marriage relationship, you go, okay, but what a difference would it make if those behaviors were present in the relationship between parents and children? What a difference it would make if it was between sisters and brothers. What a difference it would make is if we put off all of that stuff instead of using those very individuals as the actual persons that we would attack the very hardest. So the message here is about relationship, but we're going to talk about how it fits in to making love last a lifetime. Now, to me, it would only make sense that we should get the opinion of some experts on what marriage is. And for those of you who are old enough to remember Mae West, she had a very knowledgeable and important word on marriage. She says marriage is a great institution, but she's not ready for an institution yet. Hopefully you're laughing at Mae West and not at your own marriage. Well, then in Social Psychology Quarterly, I think we need a scientific view. Greg Gutfield wrote, this was literally in the quarterly, and he says, if you can stay married for 35 years, you'll be just as happy as you were on your honeymoon. For the time in between, consider a trial separation. And then, one of the most wise individuals that the good Lord ever put on the earth, I'm sure, Rodney Dangerfield said, we sleep in separate rooms, we have dinner apart, we take separate vacations, we're doing everything we can to keep our marriage up together. What's sad is, Rodney's probably a lot closer to some of the truth that I hear and that we know for today. But you know, maybe today we would change those words to say something like, well, I've got my bills, you have your bills. I have my money, you have your money. I have my friends, you have your friends. We each have our own jobs in this house. You take care of that part of the house, I take care of this part of the house. Each part of our lives in that marriage relationship becomes this is mine, that is yours, that's the way it is, and then we wonder why we say things like, it seems like we drifted apart. Did you drift? Or did you just get in a car and turn it in the opposite direction and drive? This idea of the whole message for the 4 weeks I've called Love and Marriage, for those of us who are old enough could probably start singing Love and Marriage, and all the younger folks are going, what? That's right. But that's sort of where I stole that too. But you know, at times when we look at this, and I was reading something by Pastor Tim Smith, and he wrote this, he said that, how can couples make their love last a lifetime? With the divorce rate is skyrocketing, he said, I believe that it is the most significant question that married couples in our nation faces for today. When I stand before couples, he said, as they say their wedding vows, all of them intend for it to be for a lifetime. He said, not many couples come into the marriage saying, I'm going to give you the best 5 years. And then after that, I'm going somewhere else. He said, most people believe that this is a forever commitment. You know, another interesting fact that he brought up, he says, think about it, there were hundreds of hours that went into the planning for most weddings. I didn't think there were hundreds in our planning, but having married off 2 daughters, I will tell you there are definitely hundreds of hours if you're marrying off a daughter. At least I've found. But there are hundreds of hours that go into planning the wedding, the honeymoon, and yet nothing seems to be done to prepare the planning for the future of the marriage. 5 days after the wedding, all the planning, nothing to do. What do we do now? We don't have any invitations to send out. We don't have to do any. There's all of a sudden there's no planning, and everything's just supposed to work out fine. Wow. How does that work? Oh, sure, you may save for a house together, and you may save for a college fund for your kids, or vacation, but that's not planning your marriage. That's planning for somebody else. Because the vacation that you're going to take more often than not is the preference of one of the 2 of you, not always the both of you. The future of your marriage and the future of marriages for your children is about making love last a lifetime. Now, the reason I include our children is because if the future is involved, then our kids have to be involved. A young son's first view and first understanding of how a man treats a woman comes from his father. And the first understanding of how a woman treats a young man comes from a daughter's mother. If our love is going to last a lifetime, and in today's society, when those of us who are grandparents in the room are sometimes the prime example, we're still being examples. This is what is actually happening. Of course, every relationship starts with romantic and passionate love and sexual response and desire, and all of that goes, and then you get 5 or 10 years set up the road, and one morning somebody wakes up and says, I don't think I love you anymore. Folks, I'm going to tell you that short of a catastrophic event the night before, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight. And why is it then that more than 50% of marriages are ending in divorce? Can it be changed? Can it be avoided? I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to share information and try to look at some biblical aspects of this and see what we end up with. So what do you have to do to make love last a lifetime? Well, William Harvey wrote in his book called Give and Take, The Secret of Marital Compatibility. It talks about those feelings that you had when you first fell in love. The passion, excitement, the sheer thrill of it all. He points out that what it took to make those sparks fly. It took a great deal of time, which is my focus with the kids. Relationships take time. Now, depending on when you met your spouse or your former spouse or whatever it was, let's say it was in high school or in college or some point in life, did you ever have your friends go, oh, fine, you're not going to hang out with us anymore, huh? You're going to spend all your time with him or her? Did you ever hear your parents or remember the words, are you ever going to join the family for dinner again? Or are you always going to be at his house or her house? Because to build those relationships that had sparks and fire and all the excitement that we had took time. And it took time away from other people who were already there. You did that because you cared about him or her. You did that because that is what you were trying to develop. It's interesting, in a survey of persons who were unhappy in their marriage, they went on a date less than once every 6 months. Now, I understand money can be an issue, prevents you from going on dates, but dates don't have to be expensive. If you went out on a date once a year with someone that you were seeing in high school, or the person that you're married to now, if you only dated them once a year, do you think you'd be married today? I'm almost certain that we would not be. Yeah, she will tell you it took 5.5 years for me to ask her. I get that. I'm a slow learner. But that would have been 5.5 dates. And I don't think we'd be married. Because if it took me 5.5 years of steady dating, I never got there. You know, in courtship, we tend to sell each other a bill of goods. We come in and we try to do things that try to make ourselves something, maybe not something that we're not, but something that we're enhanced. And hopefully it's not something that you're not, because making yourself something that you're not could be the reason that you're now struggling. The spark starts flying somewhere along the way, and then it falls out. But I believe that could change. I believe Christian marriages should reflect the message that Paul writes about all relationships. But even more so because a man and a woman are to treat each other as Christ treats the church. We have said repeatedly in marriage counseling, I said, interesting when you look at Galatians, can you imagine if one spouse treated the other the way Christ treats the church? You think it'd be easier to compromise? You think it would be easier to make team decisions? So, first of all, it comes down to what we said for the last however many months and years. It comes down to if Christ is not the center of your relationship, like we talk with the kids, if they aren't spending more time growing the relationship with Jesus in their life, how are you going to be able to grow a relationship with someone else? Because you don't know a true sacrificial, loving relationship. So then when Christ becomes the center of your life, then in your married relationship, if Christ is not at the center of your married relationship, then it doesn't mean it's going to fall apart. But it will never fully be what God intended. It may be good. It may have moments of greatness. It may have great kids. It may not have kids, whatever it is. But without Christ at the center, it will never be completely what God expected it to be. So Paul teaches us that not only can it be changed, but it can only be changed by the power of God. In fact, it'd be like the old, you can't change a leopard's spots. You know, a leopard can work as hard as it wants to. We sometimes do it. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change my life. I think this came up in men's group just on Tuesday night. We were talking about we work so hard that we're going to fix things. And we never did it until we finally reached the point and said, God, I can't fix it. And that's the same in our marriage. There's some things that each of us can do to make it better. But it's God that changes us from the inside out. That's what this gospel, that's this message is all about. Jesus came to deal with our sin, to change us inside out. Now, we're going to look at 6 different things. First is your commitment to marriage vows. So how's your commitment to marriage vows? You go, well, and some of you can, and some of you can't say, never had an affair, never violated that. Excuse me. I don't remember in my weddings spending a lot of time saying, do you promise to never have an affair? You will promise to be true and faithful and loyal to that person. But there was a whole lot of other words in there. There was a sickness, there was a health, there was a rich, there was a poor, there was a long list of marriage vows things. And yet we narrow it down like, well, I'm doing a pretty good job, guys. Didn't have an affair. That wasn't the end of it. There was more than that. So first, so how are we working on that? Second, communicating and sharing. Okay, guys, I always make fun because I know, we got to talk about our feelings again, a study was done a couple of years back. It tracked the amount of communication in a marriage. This is interesting. The first year in a marriage, the husband and wife spent almost an hour each day in one-on-one communication. By the third year, it dropped to 35 minutes. By the 5th year, it dropped to 15. And by the 7th year, it was down to 7 minutes a day. And just for your information, this predates Instagram and Facebook and the plethora of the internet. Because my guess is that some of us sit in our living rooms and we watch TV together as husband and wife doing this. The third is, I laugh because this is one of our babies. Do you really listen to your spouse? Oh, I sometimes hear you. I shared a story at West, I've got a good friend of mine, and he said, this literally happened in his house. And his wife is a very strong, you gotta listen, and I love her to death, we're closest friends. But he said on one night that they were talking, and he said, do you hear what I'm saying? Uh-huh. That's the response. And he said, so, did you hear the such and such happen or whatever? Uh-huh. And uh-huh wouldn't have been the answer. It should have been uh-huh. And so then he said, so did you hear that balloons fell in the backyard and blew up the patio? Uh-huh. He actually said it, and I said, oh man, you're a lucky man not to get caught in that one. We do that. That may be exaggerated, but we do that. We don't listen. Guys, how often do we know, for all the years that we've been with them, because we know what they're going to say and they're halfway through and we just interrupt them and fix it for them. Because we know what they're going to say, they've said it before. I don't know about you, but that doesn't work well in my house. It hasn't stopped me from still doing it. And we'll get to that part in just a minute. But do you listen or do you interrupt? Are you patient when telling a story? And yes, sometimes one spouse or the other, sometimes when you ask them what time it is, can tell you how to build an intricate Swiss watch. Janet's involved, I can't say a word. And I don't want to know how to build an intricate Swiss watch. Fourth, demonstrate your affections regularly. In other words, practice meaningful touches. Do you know when I went into teaching, This is the difference of where we are now. I was told that it is possible that I would be the only positive touch that child would receive in the whole day. And the hope was that they would get 7 from all the teachers before they left. By the time I retired, I was called a pedophile for that. But it didn't change, because I believed that God was going to do whatever, and there were kids there who needed that. If that's what every kid that walked into my classroom needed, why in heaven's name do we treat our married relationships so differently? But they annoy me. They snored last night. It really kept me up. I'm tired. So we completely throw everything at it. I don't even think that touch on the shoulder. We're a species that needs touching. We have 2 new cats, and they still curl up and sleep together. Now, they get separated, they bleed, but when they get the chance, they touch. Meaningful touches and language of passion don't leave the house. And folks, I ain't saying I'm good at all this stuff. A kiss goodnight, a kiss good morning, a kiss goodbye, a kiss whatever, a hello. Practice saying I love you. And yeah, you may be at the point that all of that's gone out the window. Show up next week and we'll talk about fixing it. All right? But this is where we are. You want it to last a lifetime. These are the things that you need to do. Work on projects. The 5th one. Work on projects together. Have common interests. And you go, well, I was reading an article here, and the one spouse was saying that she learned to play golf to be with her husband so they could have more time together. Well, I will tell you that my spouse is not going to learn to play golf, and she's not going to learn to shoot a bow and arrow and go climb up a tree stand. However, maybe redecorating the bathroom can be a team effort instead of it's my bathroom. Maybe planning the selection of the carpet can be our project. Share some things in common. Get some common interests. Well, we don't have any. Get some. My mother used to tell me when she retired, she said, I don't have any hobbies. I don't want any hobbies. I said, well, you need to get one. I don't want one. Well, then you're going to be miserable. 6, cultivate passion. That's right. The pastor of the church are telling you to create passion and celebrate it because it is a gift from God. Now, I understand there are aspects of life in which passion doesn't get translated in the way it did when we were 18 and 20 for physical reasons, whatever it is, but we were designed to be passionate together. Create alternative methods of passion. Within your marriage, it is your call. We've talked about this in the past. Within your marriage, God will bless it. Within your marriage, you may have to go, well, but we've never done that before. Been together for 35 years. Sometimes God's saying, grow this and make it strong. Do something. Create that passion that is missing. I'm going to tell you, looking back at the friendly touch, at the intimate touch, and then trying to create passion, do you find it hard to be angry when you're touching somebody else? As a coach, I'd walk up to a kid and I'd put my arm on his shoulder. And I was about to tell him that he made the biggest bonehead play that I'd seen in a month. But by touching his shoulder, I had diffused all those edges. 1, there's no way I could say it in an angry way. And 2, there was no way that he would hear it as offensive as he would have if I yelled at him across the room. Chemist Neil Warren says, he writes that passionate chemistry can be cultivated. Spontaneity is nice, magic attraction is nice, but sometimes you have to create it. In today's society, if you want to schedule it, you may have to schedule time, folks. I was just talking with a group of men that I meet in prayer group with and all, and they were talking about having these issues in their marriage, and they were talking about, maybe we should schedule it. But he said it just feels so mechanical. And I said, so doing nothing versus scheduling it. Scheduling does sound weird to some of us. But my guess is if you schedule it and you force it for a little while, that it won't be long that you won't have to schedule and force it anymore. The last one, and this goes with the vows, is cherish. For those of us who took the old wedding vows, it said you will honor and cherish. What's cherish mean? Cherish? Well, cherish is valuing them for what they are. That doesn't mean that they don't get to try to change. But if you have, let's pick on the guys, you have a husband who is not romantic, and he finally gets his act together, and he finally does something a little romantic, but it's not what your friend Betty's husband did, cherish that he made the effort. You got a husband who can build things, cherish that. You could be married to me. There's a whole lot of reasons you probably don't want that. Cherish them for what they are, but it doesn't mean that they're locked in stone. When they go, I'm not changing because, well, you know I'm not a romantic. Well, guys, suck it up. Those country music fans said Alan Jackson sings a song, and it talks about, in one of the songs, he says, I picked the kids up at daycare today, and I did something else. It's not a big thing, but for him it was. Celebrate that. That's what cherishing is. That's what that opportunity is. Cherish is that you're going to look at and say, they aren't all I wanted, but they're a godly man or woman. They aren't all I wanted, but they're a great mom and dad. They're not all I wanted. How do we know what we want? Because what we wanted at 18 is not what we want at 61. It's different, and it changes. Take those 6 things, you look at your checklist when you go home and work on them. Talk about them. And next week we'll talk about rebuilding it. But now, I want you to walk in here and know that what you got is worth cherishing. And if you're not married, then what you've got in your brother and sister relationship, and what you've got in your father-son and children's relationship, cherish it. Grow it. Put Christ at the center, and then sit back and wait for the Holy Spirit. Amen. As you're able to stand and sing Happy in the Home, watch the pastor.